Hello. In this video, we will be going over CPSC's requirements for infant garments and children's tight-fitting sleepwear garments. Congress enacted the Flammable Fabrics Act, also known as the FFA, in response to a number of serious injuries and deaths resulting from burns associated with clothing. The authority for the enforcement of the FFA was transferred to CPSC in 1973. In the 1970s, 16 CFR Parts 1615 and 1616, the standards for the flammability of children's sleepwear, were created to address the ignition of children's sleepwear, such as nightgowns, pajamas, and robes. In 1996, an amendment to 16 CFR Parts 1615 and 1616 included children's tight-fitting sleepwear garments. This amendment provided consumers with alternatives to flame-resistant garments. Let's go over the requirements in more detail. Products defined as children's sleepwear are subject to 16 CFR Part 1615 and 16 CFR Part 1616, the standards for the flammability of children's sleepwear. Part 1615 is for children's sizes 0 through 6X, and Part 1616 is for children's sizes 7 through 14. The standards are intended to protect children from a risk of personal injury or death from contact with hot surfaces and small open flame ignition sources, such as stove elements, matches, and lighters. These standards differ from and are more stringent than 16 CFR Part 1610, the standard for the flammability of clothing textiles, also known as the General Wearing Apparel Flammability Standard. For more information about 16 CFR Part 1610, check out our animated video overview of the requirements at the link on screen in the top right corner. What products are considered children's sleepwear subject to 16 CFR Parts 1615 and 1616? Children's sleepwear subject to Parts 1615 and 1616 is defined as a product of wearing apparel, sizes 0 through 14, intended to be worn primarily for sleeping or activities related to sleeping, such as nightgowns, pajamas, loungewear, and robes. Exceptions for children's sleepwear include diapers and underwear, which are subject to 16 CFR Part 1610, infant garments as defined by Section 1615.1c, and tight-fitting garments as defined by Section 1615.10 and Section 1616.2m. Garments that meet the definition of children's sleepwear and are not one of those three exceptions are considered traditional sleepwear or loose-fitting sleepwear, and are required to be tested to the full requirements under 16 CFR Parts 1615 and 1616. Examples of these types of garments include nightgowns, bathrobes, and loungewear garments. You can find additional information about testing protocols in CPSC's Laboratory Test Manual for 16 CFR Parts 1615 and 1616, and CPSC Staff's Sleepwear Policy and Loungewear Position Letter on CPSC's Children's Sleepwear Business Guidance page. For more information about children's diaper requirements, watch our animated video on the topic at the link listed on screen in the top right corner. In this video, we will focus on the requirements for infant garments and tight-fitting garments. These garments are subject to the testing requirements of 16 CFR Part 1610. But the criteria to meet these definitions are defined in 16 CFR Parts 1615 and 1616. Under 16 CFR Section 1615.1c, infant garments must meet all of the following: are sized 9 months and or smaller, if a one-piece garment, it does not exceed 64.8 centimeters in total length. If a two-piece garment, it has no piece exceeding 40 centimeters in total length, complies with applicable requirements of 16 CFR Part 1610 and 16 CFR Part 1611, and must bear a permanent label stating the size of the garment expressed in months. For example, 0 to 3 months or 9 months. Infant garments do not need to have tight-fitting tagging or labeling. If the garment doesn't meet the infant garment dimension criteria, then it will likely need to be tested and certified to the full requirements of 16 CFR Part 1615. We will go over some compliance requirements for 16 CFR Part 1610 shortly, but first, let's go over the criteria for a tight-fitting sleepwear garment. Garments that meet the tight-fitting requirements are not subject to the more stringent flammability testing requirements of 16 CFR Parts 1615 and 1616. To meet the definition of a tight-fitting garment, the garment must not exceed the maximum dimensions listed in 16 CFR Section 1615.101 or 16 CFR Section 1616.2 M1, must comply with specific labeling, tagging, and packaging requirements, and must comply with the applicable requirements of 16 CFR Part 1610, the standard for the flammability of clothing textiles. Let's go over these requirements in more detail. Tight-fitting garments must not exceed the maximum dimensions specified for the chest, waist, seat, upper arm, thigh, wrist, or ankle measurements at 16 CFR Section 1615.10 for sizes 0 through 6X and 16 CFR Section 1616.2M for sizes 7 through 14, and must have no item of fabric, ornamentation, or trim, such as lace, appliques, or ribbon, which extends more than 6 millimeters or 1/4 inch from the point of attachment to the outer surface of the garment. Children's nightgowns and robes are not permitted to be considered tight-fitting sleepwear, as these items would not be able to meet the specified measurement requirements. These types of garments must meet the regular flammability testing requirements of 16 CFR Parts 1615 and 1616. To appropriately measure the garments, place the garment face up on a flat, horizontal surface, flatten the garment, and smooth out any wrinkles. You will then measure the distance as specified in the citations on the screen and multiply by 2. The measurements should be equal to or less than the maximum dimensions provided in the tables. Please note that the table illustrated in this video is not the full table. Please refer to the standards to view the full measurement values. To measure the chest, measure the distance from armpit seam to armpit seam, points A to B. Make sure to flatten the seams and finger press any folds. To measure the waist on a one-piece garment, measure at the narrowest part between the chest and seat measurement, from point C to D. To measure the waist for the top of a two-piece garment, measure the width at the hemline of the top from points C to D. To measure the waist for the bottom of a two-piece garment, measure the top edge of the pants in the relaxed state from point C to D. Please note that the pants cannot have any attachment or decoration at the waist extending more than 1/4 of an inch. To measure the wrist for long sleeve garments, measure the width of the end of the sleeve or cuff from points E to F. To measure the upper arm, ensure the garment is in a flat and relaxed state. Use a straight edge to form a line from the waist at point D through the armpit to the shoulder of the garment from points B to G. Mark point G on the garment. Refer to the tables of the citations referenced on screen to determine the measurement distance from point G to H. Measure across the sleeve, perpendicular to the top edge of the sleeve, from points H to I to determine the upper arm measurement. For short-sleeved garments, the sleeve must taper from the top of the shoulder to the end of the sleeve. Tapering means to diminish in width or get smaller gradually. To measure the seat, start by folding the front of the pants in half to find the bottom of the crotch, labeled as point J. Mark point K on the crotch seam at 4 inches above and perpendicular to the bottom of the crotch. To get the seat measurement, unfold the garment and measure the seat from points L to M through K as shown. To measure the thigh, fold the front of the pants in half and from the bottom of the crotch at point J, measure 1 inch down the inseam to mark point N. Unfold the garment and measure the thigh from the inseam at point N to point O as shown. For shorts or capri pants that do not extend to the ankle, the pant leg may not exceed the maximum width for the thigh and must diminish in width gradually, or taper, as it approaches the ankle, or the bottom of the leg of the garment. How do you measure tight-fitting sleepwear garments that have a gusset feature? A gusset is a diamond-shaped piece of fabric inserted in the crotch seam to permit greater movement. When a gusset is used in the pant bottom of a tight-fitting sleepwear garment, you will use the same techniques to measure the seat and thigh as described in the standards, which we just went over. With the insert of a gusset, the distance measurements are made from the bottom of the crotch, which may not necessarily be a seam line on the garment. This is the point to measure 1 inch downward along the outside of the garment and then take the thigh measurement across the thigh. For pants that extend to the ankle, to obtain the ankle measurement, measure across the width of the end of the pant leg from point P to point Q. Footed garments are not expressly prohibited on a tight-fitting sleepwear garment. These garments must comply with the tight-fitting ankle measurement specifications. To measure the ankle for a footed garment, first ensure that the garment is in a flat, relaxed state. If there is no elastic at the ankle, take the measurement 1 inch above the front upper seam of the foot. Measure from point P to point Q to obtain the ankle measurement. If there is an elastic ankle, measure at the elastic on the back of the garment in the flat yet relaxed state. Measure from point P to point Q to obtain the ankle measurement. The foot portion of the garment should be proportional to the garment size. In addition to the measurement requirements, tight-fitting garments must have no item of fabric, ornamentation, or trim, such as lace, appliques, or ribbon, which extends more than 6 mm or 1/4 of an inch from the point of attachment to the outer surface of the garment. Brand tags and labels on the outside of tight-fitting garments are considered trim and must not extend more than 1/4 of an inch from the point of attachment to the outer surface of the garment. Lettuce edges are considered decorative features to the edge of a tight-fitting garment and cannot extend more than 1/4 of an inch from the point of attachment. To check this, measure the height of the scallop when the garment is laying on a flat surface, with the ruler held perpendicular to the scallop. This height measurement shall not exceed 1/4 of an inch. Tight-fitting garments may include fasteners such as button or snap closures. Additional snaps or buttons may need to be added to properly bound the fabric. However, when using these features, you must ensure that the fabric does not raise more than 1/4 of an inch in between snap or button closures. The closure fasteners themselves must not extend more than 1/4 of an inch in height. A tight-fitting garment is permitted to have a placket. However, the garment cannot have a placket that exceeds more than 1/4 of an inch from the point of attachment after it is buttoned or snapped. The chosen closure, button, or snap also cannot extend more than 1/4 of an inch in height. Appliques sewn onto tight-fitting garments must comply with 16 CFR Part 1610. Ribbed cuffs used on a children's tight-fitting garment must meet the tight-fitting garment dimension for the wrist as described at the citations listed on screen. Drop drawer features on the bottoms of children's tight-fitting garments must have multiple snaps or button fasteners to ensure that the fabric is properly bound. The fabric must not raise more than 1/4 of an inch between fasteners and seams, and there must not be any extensions more than 1/4 of an inch from the point of attachment to the outer surface. Tight-fitting garments must bear labels stating the size of the garment in terms of age in months or by child size, such as size 9 to 12 months or size 5. If the label is not visible to the consumer when the garment is offered for sale at retail, the sizing information must appear legibly on the package of the garment. The sizing information does not need to be on the packaging if the label is visible to the consumer, such as in scenarios where clear plastic packaging is used. Children's tight-fitting garments must also bear a yellow hang tag stating, "For child safety, garments should fit snugly. This garment is not flame resistant. Loose-fitting garment is more likely to catch fire. The hang tag itself in the text must meet size specifications and must be 18-point Arial or Helvetica font. The hang tag must have a yellow background with black lettering. The color yellow must meet the specifications for standard safety yellow as described in ANSI Z535.1-1998. The hang tag must be prominently displayed on the garment and should not be covered by any other label. See the citations referenced on screen for the exact measurement and hue specifications, as well as additional guidelines for hang tags. If the garments are sold in packages, the package must have a label with the same language that would appear on the hang tag. The label must have a text box that meets size specifications and must be an 11-point Arial or Helvetica font in black lettering against a yellow background. The packages must be prominently, conspicuously, and legibly labeled with the required messaging. The label can be adhesive on the package. If the packages are clear or use a label band, and the hang tag is visible through the packaging label is not required. See the citations referenced on screen for additional information about packaging requirements for tight-fitting garments. The garments must also bear labels stating, "Wear snug-fitting, not flame-resistant." The text must be printed on the front of the sizing label located on the center back of the garment and must be immediately below the size designation. The text must be a minimum of 5-point sans serif font in all capital letters and must be set apart from other label text by a line border. The text must contrast with the background color of the label and must not be covered by any other label. See the citations referenced on screen for additional information about this labeling requirement for tight-fitting garments. Infant garments and tight-fitting sleepwear garments, as defined earlier in the video, are also subject to 16 CFR Part 1610, the standard for the flammability of clothing textiles. Is flammability testing required for products subject to 16 CFR Part 1610? Fabrics that meet a specific exemption under 16 CFR Section 1610.1d do not require testing. For the first exemption, plain surface fabrics weighing 2.6 ounces per square yard or more do not need to be tested, regardless of fiber content. Weighing the fabric does not have to be conducted by a lab, and you can measure the weight yourself or check to see if this information is provided on the fabric roll you are using to construct the garment. For the second exemption, plain and raised surface fabrics made entirely of acrylic, mod acrylic, nylon, olefin, polyester, wool, or a combination of these fibers, regardless of weight, are exempt from testing. Fabrics that contain any other fibers other than the 6 specified would not meet this exemption. If the infant garments or tight-fitting garments do not meet either of these exemptions, they likely need to be tested to the flammability requirements under 16 CFR Part 1610. For more information about this rule, including an overview of plain surface and raised surface fabrics, check out our video on the topic at the link on screen in the top right corner. Infant garments and tight-fitting sleepwear garments are subject to additional children's product requirements, other than the flammability requirements we just went over. Children's products are subject to the total lead content requirements of 15 U.S.C. Section 1278A. All accessible component parts of children's products must comply with the lead content limit of 100 parts per million. The accessible components must be third-party tested for compliance if no testing determination, exception, or exemption applies. Under 16 CFR Section 1500.91 D7, the Commission issued a determination that natural and manufactured textiles that are dyed and undyed and that are not treated or adulterated do not need to be tested for total lead content. CPSC also made similar determinations under 16 CFR Section 1500.91 for other materials, including wood and stainless steel. If the garments have any fasteners or accessories, including metal or plastic snaps, buttons, or grommets, they will also need to be tested separately to certify that they meet the total lead content requirements. Additionally, under 16 CFR Part 1303, painted or coated components and printing processes that use a liquid or semi-liquid surface coating that hardens need to comply with the lead in paint limit of 90 parts per million. Painted fasteners and screen printing are common examples that need to comply with the lead in paint and similar surface coating requirements. Every paint or surface coating color will need to be tested at a third-party CPSC accepted lab, because different colors can affect compliance with the requirements. To reduce testing costs, consider asking the third-party CPSC accepted lab if they can perform composite testing, where multiple samples of paint are tested at the same time. For more information about composite testing requirements, see 16 CFR Section 1109.21. The Commission banned children's toys and childcare articles that facilitate sleeping, feeding, sucking, or teething in children ages 3 and younger that contain 8 specified phthalates in amounts greater than 0.1%. Phthalates are chemicals used in plastics and plasticized components, such as buttons, snaps, zippers, no-skid grippers on the bottom of footed sleepwear garments, and certain types of screen printing inks. In general, children's products, including children's sleepwear, must be tested to applicable safety requirements at a third-party CPSC-accepted laboratory. Some children's products may not need testing based on product design, construction, age grading, and whether they meet certain exemptions, exceptions, and determinations. You can find an accredited lab at cpsc.gov/labsearch. However, if you are a qualifying and registered small batch manufacturer, you might be provided relief from third-party testing to certain safety rules, called Group B requirements. This does not mean small batch manufacturers are exempt from complying with applicable requirements. Certification to Group B requirements can be done by means other than testing from a third-party CPSC accepted lab, such as through first-party or in-house testing, testing by a lab not on CPSC's lab search list, or receiving a written assurance of compliance from your producer or supplier. Group A requirements must always be tested at a third-party CPSC accepted lab, regardless of your status as a registered small batch manufacturer. You can find more information about whether you qualify as a small batch manufacturer and how to register at cpsc.gov/smallbatch. Once domestic manufacturers and importers have received passing test results for applicable requirements for their products and have gathered any additional compliance documentation, they must issue a Children's Product Certificate, also known as a CPC. To learn more about how to create a CPC, Visit our guidance page at cpsc.gov/cpc and by checking out our 3-part education series for CPCs. Part 1 is linked on screen in the top right corner. Children's garments and their packaging are required to have tracking information, also known as tracking labels. A tracking label is a distinguishing permanent mark that is affixed to the product and its packaging, to the extent practicable, and provides certain identifying information that is ascertainable, including the manufacturer, importer, or private labeler, date and location of production, and batch code or cohort information that helps identify the specific source of the product. To learn more about the tracking label requirement, check out our guidance page at cpsc.gov/tracking label and our tracking label overview video, which is linked on screen in the top right corner. Now that you've learned about the general requirements for infant garments and tight-fitting sleepwear garments, let's go over some frequently asked questions that CPSC staff has received about the topic. Do tight-fitting garment measurement assessments need to be conducted by a third-party CPSC-accepted lab? No. You can conduct a measurement assessment yourself using the methods described in the standards and this video. You will need to maintain the assessment records for a minimum of 5 years. Are pockets permitted on children's tight-fitting sleepwear garments? Pockets may be incorporated if the pocket's design has either a button, snap, or hook and loop closure, so that the fabricated pocket opening is properly bound and remains close to the body. Pockets that are bound properly do not have fabric that raises more than 1/4 of an inch between fasteners and seams, and do not have any extensions more than 1/4 of an inch. Pockets that do not have a fastener or closure feature would not comply with the tight-fitting garment requirements unless they are decorative and so tight that they are non-functional pockets. Are zipper tabs, zipper flaps, zipper garages, and zipper guards permitted for tight-fitting sleepwear garments even if they extend 1/4 of an inch? Yes. These design features are intended to prevent chafing, rubbing, and pinching of the wearer's neck and chin from the zipper head. Therefore, these design features are defined as functional if they are affixed in such a way that is consistent with their purpose. The overall length should only be what is necessary for its intended function. Can sizes for infant garments or tight-fitting garments be expressed as extra small, small, medium, large, or extra large? No. Sizes must be expressed in months or numbers, as listed in 16 CFR Parts 1615 and 1616. What requirements apply to a singularly sized garment, such as 12 months, that falls between two size ranges in the standards? In this case, these size ranges are 9 to 12 months and 12 to 18 months. A garment that is marked only as 12 months will fall into the bigger sized range requirement that includes it, which in this case would be 12 to 18 months. Am I allowed to list two sizes on a single tight-fitting sleepwear garment? For example, can I list a size as 5/6? Sizes for tight-fitting sleepwear garments should be consistent with how they are presented in 16 CFR Parts 1615 and 1616, as the requirements do not allow tolerance between sizes that are not specifically listed, like with the size category such as 12 to 18 months. If you plan on listing two sizes, such as 5/6, the garment must not exceed the maximum measurement dimensions of the smaller size listed. What testing is required for no-skid grippers on the bottom of the feet of children's sleepwear garments? Grippers on the bottom of the feet of children's sleepwear garments are considered functional and excluded from the trim definition in 16 CFR parts 1615 and 1616. Grippers will need to be tested for total lead content for all children's ages, and if there are plasticized components, for phthalates if the sleepwear is for children ages 3 and younger. We are developing a line of children's active base layers and thermal underwear. Are these subject to children's sleepwear requirements? Thermal underwear is subject to 16 CFR Part 1610 due to the fabric's characteristics. These garments are intended to keep one's body warm by insulating body heat and keeping the body dry via wicking. However, this style garment can be made to meet tight-fitting sleepwear garment specifications and marketed as dual-purpose garments. Thermal underwear that does not meet tight-fitting sleepwear requirements must only be marketed as thermal underwear and in a manner so that is not to be used as sleepwear. In this case, you should not include any printed designs or patterns on the thermal underwear and should label and market the garments as thermal underwear only. The tight-fitting garment requirements reference the phrase diminish in width gradually. What does this mean? Diminish in width gradually is another phrase for the word tapering. In other words, the width must get smaller from point to point where referenced in the requirements. We are planning on making a children's sleepwear set consisting of a flame-resistant top paired with a tight-fitting garment bottom. Can they be sold as a set? Combining flame-resistant garments that meet the full flammability testing requirements of 16 CFR parts 1615 and 1616 with tight-fitting sleepwear garments of the same size is permitted if the required testing, labeling, tagging, and measurement requirements for each garment are met. This concludes our frequently asked questions about infant garments and children's tight-fitting sleepwear garments. We hope you found this information helpful. If you're new to product safety or need guidance on CPSC requirements, CPSC's Regulatory Robot is an online tool that will walk you through a series of questions to discover the likely applicable requirements for your product. You will receive a customized end report with a unique URL. The Regulatory Robot is also available in multiple languages, and the language can be toggled at the top of the page. You can access the Regulatory Robot tool at business.cpsc.gov/robot. We also recommend that you check out children's sleepwear recalls and other product safety recalls on CPSC's website at cpsc.gov/recalls. We hope you learned a lot about CPSC requirements for infant garments and children's tight-fitting sleepwear garments. If you have questions about children's sleepwear or any other requirements involving your consumer products, please contact CPSC Small Business Ombudsman team. You can visit cpsc.gov/smallbiz, submit an inquiry through our contact form at cpsc.gov/sbocontact, by calling toll-free at 888-531-9070 or by emailing us at sbo@cpsc.gov. We also recommend that you subscribe to our monthly business education newsletter that provides regulatory updates and other resources, such as webinars and videos about CPSC requirements. You can subscribe by going to cpsc.gov/email and by clicking the checkbox for business education. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more educational videos and webinars from CPSC in the future.